Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Saltzbaugh, and I am with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Ensuring Quality Care, Residents' Rights, Resources, and the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I would like to turn things over to our webinar presenter, Amity Overall-Lave.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you today. I'm the director of the National Long-Term Care Ombudsman Resource Center, and I'll talk quite a bit about what the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program is, what they do, and how to reach out to them later in the presentation. For a little bit of background, I used to be a long-term care ombudsman in Texas for about 6 years and covered 12 rural counties. Had about 65 nursing facilities I was responsible for visiting and 130 assisted living facilities, myself and 2 staff and some volunteers. So I have some field experience, and then I started working with the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, which receives a grant from the Administration for Community Living to operate the Resource Center. So I've been in this work for about 18 years, and I'm very glad to be here today. So we only have an hour, and I, of course, want to share as much information as I can. So due to time and, frankly, the breadth of today's topic, I am only providing a high-level overview of 5 key topics about ensuring quality care. And ideally, I'd like you to walk away with a basic knowledge of the topics we reviewed today and where to go for more information. So specifically, I'll be covering you have rights, advocating for quality care, you have an advocate, you have tools to help find quality affirming care, and you have resources. So I'm going to jump right into our first topic about rights, because individuals living in long-term care facilities have rights, and I'll provide a basic overview of resident rights. As I mentioned, individuals living in nursing facilities and residential care communities, otherwise known as assisted living facilities or board and care homes, maintain the same rights as individuals in the larger community. And they actually have additional rights and protections in federal and/or state law. As all residents, regardless of the type of facility, have the right to be protected from mistreatment, including abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Nursing facilities must meet federal requirements in order to participate in Medicare and Medicaid. Those requirements include resident rights and require that residents receive services and activities that attain or maintain the highest practicable physical, mental, and psychosocial well-being of each resident in accordance with a written plan of care. And that facilities care for its residents in such a manner and in such an environment that will promote maintenance or enhancement of their quality of life. There are no federal regulations for residential care communities, so that's important to know. So requirements and rights are different in each state for that setting. Despite the regulatory differences among nursing facilities and residential care, the indicators of quality care and advocacy sets that I'll share later are applicable in all settings. So about resident rights, for simplicity and consistency across the country, I'm only going to refer to federal laws and regulations that are applicable only to nursing facilities that accept Medicaid and Medicare. As I mentioned in the last slide, there are no comparable federal laws or regulations for residential care communities. So refer to your state laws and regulations for those. Also refer to state laws and regulations for nursing facilities that do not accept Medicaid or Medicare and that are only private pay. Those are very far and few between, but these regs do not apply to them. Not only must nursing facilities respect your rights, they must protect and promote your rights. So understanding your rights, learning about ways to solve problems, and knowing how to get help if and when issues arise, they're the first steps in ensuring quality care. So as I mentioned, a nursing facility must protect and promote your rights. So it's not a matter of you just having rights and you being responsible for advocating for them. The facility is supposed to inform you of your rights and support your rights and promote your rights. So you do, as I mentioned, have the right to be free from abuse, neglect, misuse of resident property, and exploitation. You have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So to do so, staff must focus on assisting residents in maintaining and enhancing their self-esteem and self-worth, and include the residents' goals, preferences, and choices in their care. When providing care and services, staff must respect each resident's individuality, as well as honor and value their input. You have the right to privacy. So for example, you have privacy in your accommodations while receiving care, privacy of your medical records, your personal communications during visits, and of course, group participation, both in the facility and outside of the facility. You have the right to receive visitors, but it's also important to mention you have the right to refuse visitors as well. Because sometimes you may not want a specific visitor either all the time or maybe just that day, but that is your right because that is your home. You have the right to participate in resident or family groups or councils, activities in and outside of the facility, religious activities, and so on. You have the right to receive information in a language and a manner that you understand and participate in all aspects of your care. You also have the right to make choices about your schedule. Make sure that they're consistent with your interests, your assessments, and care plans. Facilities must not develop a schedule for care, such as waking or bathing schedules for staff convenience and without the input of residents. You have the right to exercise your rights and voice concerns without reprisal. You have the right, the facility must protect and facilitate your ability to communicate. So by phone, mail, and internet. And as I'm sure you probably remember, whether you reside in a facility or have a loved one in one, or you just listen to the news during the pandemic, those facilities were completely shut down. And the facilities had to work with ombudsmen as well as family members and residents to facilitate communication. The facility is required to be orderly, sanitary, and free from hazards. It means lighting, temperature, and sound levels should be comfortable to residents. The environment refers to all areas where residents are free to go. And the term home-like environment in the regulations de-emphasizes the institutional settings and allows the resident to use their personal belongings that support the residents' choices and opinion regarding a comfortable living environment. You also have the right, of course, to contact representatives of local, state, and federal agencies, such as the Ombudsman Program, the State Survey Agency to file complaints, APS, and others. You also have the right to stay in the facility and not be discharged or transferred, except for 6 very specific reasons that are in federal requirements. And if you do receive a discharge notice, you have the right to appeal that notice, except in a few very narrow situations. So advocating for quality care. What is quality care exactly? Quality care promotes resident dignity, choice, and self-determination in all aspects of life and care. Providing quality care means that each resident's care is individualized in order to meet their needs and preferences. To determine care needs and preferences, staff must work with the resident and/or their family and/or the resident's legal representative to gain a comprehensive understanding of what's important to them and their daily life and how they can meet their needs. Residents may have limited cognitive capacity, but they should be involved to the ability they can, and frankly, as much as they want to, in their daily care and life decisions. Quality care encompasses more than just meeting the medical care needs of an individual. It also means providing a warm, home-like environment that enables residents to participate in daily life and activities that are meaningful to them. A few indicators of quality care include quick and kind responses to call lights. Resident involvement in care and daily life is encouraged. For example, residents are encouraged to participate in their own care plans. join resident councils, provide feedback on daily life in the community, choose when they wake up and how to schedule their daily life. Residents appear clean, well-groomed, comfortable, engaged, and without visible restraints. The facility is clean, clutter-free, odor-free, and maintains a comfortable temperature. Food is appetizing and residents are offered choices and offered assistance as needed. The community is warm and engaging, and it's a welcoming environment where staff, residents, and visitors interact with each other. And also, importantly, for quality care, staff know residents and communicate respectfully. Staff know and respect their preferences and routines, and there's meaningful individual and group activities. So regular visits and communication with and between staff, residents, and family members is critical for achieving and sustaining quality care. If you or your loved one is pleased with the care and quality of life, it's still important to be involved in the community and communicate with those that live and work in the facility. So here's some tips to help keep the lines of communication open. Get to know other residents, especially those without family or visitors. Get involved in the resident or family council. If there's not a family council, start one. And if you're a resident, help make sure the resident council is resident-led and focused on the needs of the resident instead of led by a staff person. Share information about residents' rights and signs of quality care. Communicate with staff, complement good care, and also learn about the Ombudsman program and get to know them. Ideally, the Ombudsman will be visiting the facility and on a fairly regular basis. So get to know that Ombudsman representative in case you do need them. If you're a family member or friend, continue to visit often and visit at varying times so you can observe care during those different times of day. So for warning signs of care, here's a few indicators of care that need to be addressed and could be warning signs of other issues. The facility appears understaffed, and unfortunately, this is a common occurrence, especially during and coming out of the pandemic. For example, call lights are not answered promptly, or the call lights are turned off and the staff person said, I'll turn this off right now, but I'll be right back to provide care, and then they never come back. Resident rights are not respected, so there's no choices in daily routine. They're not involved in care decisions. The quality of food declines. So for example, there's fewer meal options. There's less food served. The menu's not followed. High staff turnover, and the staff are not familiar with residents. So maybe they're using an outside agency to come in too often. So those agency representatives don't know the residents. The residents appear bored, less active, not engaged. Residents or family members say concerns have not been resolved. And the facility is uncomfortable. It's not clean, it has an odor, it's too hot or too cold. And medication errors are a big warning sign as well. So what can you do if you observe or experience any of these warning signs? You could work with the resident or family council to address these concerns as a group. This is something we encourage residents that are hesitant to come forward to obviously address the concern in a group. That gives them a little bit of an anonymous approach, or same thing for a family member, strength in numbers type approach. Become familiar with resident rights and facility requirements, both the federal and state level. Make sure you document your concerns. Discuss your concerns with the administrator or leadership of the facility, share your observations and your resolution goal, document what they say they're going to do, and then document if it's resolved and keep that documentation. Contact the Ombudsman program for assistance and visit frequently, vary the times of your visits, and make notes of any issues you identify. And review the state survey reports to see if the facility has been cited for similar issues before. That's also a helpful tip because you can use that in your discussions with the facility, or if you end up having to file a complaint with a survey agency. So there's definitely some indicators that should serve as red flags of significant care issues, maybe even abuse, neglect, or exploitation that need to be addressed. For example, you notice a significant sudden change in behavior, such as lack of appetite, fearfulness, or even anxiety. Dramatic physical changes such as weight loss or decline in mobility, unexplained injuries or bruises. Residents are physically restrained or even over-medicated, so they're chemically restrained and slumped in their wheelchairs. Severe lack of staff, so just no response to call lights, frequent falls, lack of assistance to the restroom. Residents appear unclean, and staff disregard residents and their rights. So residents are not being treated with respect. Their preferences and choices are not being encouraged or honored, and complaints are ignored, as well as missing personal items or funds. What can you do if you see these red flags? They are certainly serious indicators of issues in care and quality of life. Some of these red flags could lead to or are the result of resident mistreatment, such as abuse, neglect, or exploitation. So it's important you speak with facility staff or an outside agency as soon as possible. You need to take detailed notes of the concerns, names, dates, times of the incidents, the frequency of the incidents. Contact the facility owner or the corporate office and share your concerns. Contact the Ombudsman program if the complaints are not resolved and the staff is unresponsive. You could also contact the state survey agency. Those are the folks that license and certify and survey these facilities and file a complaint. You can also report any suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation to the investigating agency. Depending on the type of facility, it could be APS. And you could also contact local law enforcement because it could be that it's actually a crime if it's abuse or exploitation. So as you all know, communication is really important, and it's important to not ignore issues or wait too long to share your concerns, just kind of hoping it gets better. It's best to address concerns clearly, directly, and promptly. And how you present the problem is important to have effective communication and problem solving. So I wanted to share a couple slides with some quick tips for communicating with staff about your concerns, as well as some examples. So when speaking with staff, define the issue. Make sure you stick to the facts. And it's hard. I've been there both personally for my care and for care of my grandparents and my parents as well, in addition to professionally. So it's sometimes you may need to take a moment to take the emotion out of you sharing your concern and make sure you stick to the facts and your observations. Make sure it's resident directed regarding their needs and preferences. If you're a family member, not your needs and preferences. Focus on the problem, so the actual issue, not the person. So instead of saying you did this or you did that or didn't do this, then you would say the issue is my mother's not receiving her meal on time, or she's dehydrated and not receiving enough water or help with her water. Avoid using emotive words that are tied to your perception. Be direct, specific, and non-judgmental. So again, describe the situation without sharing your opinion about why it happened. And discuss your resolution goals. Make sure you document everything and follow up with staff if the issue is not fully resolved. So some examples of what to avoid saying and some suggestions for more effective communication. One example would be, why are the aides so late in responding to my call light after dinner? You can understand if someone is coming to you with that, you may feel a little defensive and respond accordingly. So it may be best to say, I really need assistance getting to the restroom after dinner. And for the last 3 nights, I've had to wait for at least 20 minutes. So how could you address this so I get the help I need? Or another example, you are understaffed on the weekend. And that may be true. That's probably true. But let's address it a different way. During the week, my mom's call bell is answered really promptly. But the last 2 weekends, she's had to wait up to 20 minutes for a response. So how can we address this? So just a little bit of tweaking, changes in tone may lead to hopefully better communication and resolution to your issue. So there's several steps you can take to address your concerns. Of course, we encourage, even with the Ombudsman program, that you speak first with the facility leadership. So with their administrator, social worker, trusted staff member that you know, and try to address it with them first. If you can't resolve that issue, kind of similar to if you're trying to resolve an issue with your car or, you know, a consumer good that you purchased, you kind of want to go up the food chain. So you could contact the Ombudsman program next. And the Ombudsman program cannot, and I'll explain this in a minute, they won't get involved unless the resident wants them to get involved, but they're also an excellent resource. So if it's a family member calling and you just want some guidance on how to approach a situation, the Ombudsman can assist with that. You could contact your state licensing and certification agency, that survey agency I mentioned earlier. Contact Adult Protective Services if that is the investigative agency that comes in to investigate abuse in that setting. And again, like I mentioned, contact local law enforcement. So to talk a little bit about the advocate that you have if you are a resident in long-term care. Ombudsman, in short, is a Swedish word meaning agent or representative or someone who speaks on behalf of another. So that is the meaning of the traditional ombudsman word, but in the long-term care ombudsman program, representatives of the program, they are an advocate ombudsman. So it's a little different, and I'll explain that. First and foremost, the ombudsman program advocates for the quality of life and care of residents in nursing facilities, residential care communities, and similar other adult care homes, and is a resident advocate. So the difference in an advocacy position versus a traditional ombudsman role, the traditional ombudsman role would almost serve as a mediator between a citizen and the government, but an advocate ombudsman, they are just there for the resident, and they are even investigating and trying to resolve all complaints to the resident's satisfaction. So it's a little bit different. They're not mediators specifically. However, they may use mediation as a tactic. The Ombudsman program educates individuals on resident rights and advocates with and for residents to ensure those rights are honored and respected. The program can play an important role in helping people restore their sense of self and regain personal power and voice. There are a lot of responsibilities of the program, but the nuts and bolts are here for you. Those responsibilities include identifying, investigating, and resolving complaints made by or on behalf of residents, educating consumers about resident rights, good care practices, and other related topics, providing information to the public regarding long-term care facilities and services, resident rights, and legislative and policy issues, educating providers about resident rights, good care practices, and preventing abuse and neglect, helping develop and support resident and family councils by providing information and assistance. And this is a big one because it's really unique for a program that is in state government, advocating for improvements in the long-term care system that will benefit residents of those facilities, including representing resident interests before governmental agencies and seeking legal, administrative, or other remedies to help a resident. Ombudsman programs, as resident-centered advocates, they are directed by resident goals for complaint resolution and federal disclosure requirements. So the Ombudsman role in investigating allegations of abuse is unique and differs from other agencies such as Adult Protective Services and the State Survey Agency. Ombudsman programs don't have the same standard of evidence as APS does. They are not the official finder of fact of abuse. So in attempting to resolve a complaint to the resident satisfaction, they are not gathering information and evidence to substantiate the abuse occurred. They're looking at it from the resident's perspective. And they do verify a complaint, but that's just saying that there's enough factual evidence that it is basically true as reported by the complainant, and then they resolve it as the resident wants. So for example, if it is a situation involving abuse and the resident tells the Ombudsman program that they were yelled at and called derogatory names, but they don't want to report it to the survey agency, they just want to talk about it with the Ombudsman program. Well, the Ombudsman program is not a mandatory reporter, and they have to follow resident direction. And so they would be there to support the resident. They would talk about rights and options for reporting this, but they would only follow the resident's lead. So that's an important approach that makes it very different than other programs. So who does the program serve? They serve all individuals regardless of age living in long-term care facilities. And that's also a little bit different than some aging, what used to be called aging service providers. So part of the Older Americans Act program used to usually only serve folks 60 and older, except for the Ombudsman program, because it's serving anyone that lives in a long-term care facility. And as I said, they support resident-centered care and residents guide all action. In accordance with federal law, facilities must provide access to the program for residents. In a small number of states, Ombudsman programs also visit individuals that receive long-term care services and supports in their own home. So otherwise, you may be familiar with home and community-based services. There are a few states where the Ombudsman program does serve those individuals. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, in addition to addressing individual concerns, the program is also required to participate in systems advocacy. So whether the system is one facility and they're trying to influence change facility-wide, or a corporation that has multiple facilities, or maybe even state or federal law, the Ombudsman program is required to participate in systems advocacy to improve the quality of life for residents. And that, again, is really unique to have that as a requirement for a state program. As far as who represents the Ombudsman program, there are 53 programs across the country. So that's each state and all the NDC and the territories. There are 425 local Ombudsman entities. And what that means is the structure of state programs are either centralized, and that means that all the paid representatives of the office or the Ombudsman program are employees of the state ombudsman. And then the majority of the Ombudsman programs are actually decentralized, which means that the paid representatives of the program are not employees of the state ombudsman. Rather, those programs are hosted in these local ombudsman, they're hosted by local agencies, like area agencies on aging. And so that way they serve one region instead of the entire state, but they're still part of the statewide program. There's about 1,400 full-time staff in the program across the country, and there's a little over 4,000 certified volunteers. So volunteers of the office, those volunteer representatives receive the same minimum training that paid staff do. However, not all programs work with volunteers. But the idea behind working with volunteers is, of course, to expand access to the program so more residents have a representative visiting them. Nationwide, just to give you an idea of what the program handles, they worked to resolve 164,000 complaints. They handle a variety of complaints about quality of life and care. So some of the complaints could be about quality of life related to meal concerns. They don't have enough options, the coffee's always cold, to really serious issues such as being discharged from the facility to a homeless shelter or somewhere else that's inappropriate, or dumped in a hospital and the nursing facility is not letting them back into the nursing facility. So there's quite a range of complaints that ombudsman programs work. And not all complaints are about the care provided by the facility. Some complaints are about outside agencies, services, and individuals. So for example, if the resident originally entered the nursing facility on Medicare and they're trying to apply for Medicaid, but the application process is taking a long time, then the Ombudsman program could help them with that. They could contact the Medicaid program on the resident's behalf and be involved in that. So it's not all just facility focused, it's really resident focused. And representatives can receive and often do receive complaints from individuals other than the resident, so a loved one or a friend, but they still need permission from the resident to take action on a complaint. For example, sometimes a family member has a concern and I would go visit the resident and the resident didn't share that concern and they didn't want me involved. And so I would have to tell the family member that it's your loved one's right to not pursue this complaint. But if you have that issue as a family member, they could approach the facility separately. It's just not something the Ombudsman can get involved in. Now, a question we get a lot is, what if the resident cannot provide consent? They just don't have the capacity to do so. Then we would work with their family member or their legal representative to resolve issues. So as you can see, Ombudsman programs handle a variety of concerns and are resident advocates in all aspects of their work. To get more information about the program or find out how to contact your local representative, you can visit this URL here. It'll take you to the map that's on our website and you'll be able to be in touch with your program. So I know we have a variety of folks on the call today, and so I wanted to leave you with, if you ever do need to look for a long-term care facility, some tips about how to do your homework to find one that'll meet your needs. So as you begin to evaluate facilities, as part of your homework, definitely reach out to the Ombudsman program. So just to give you an idea, the Ombudsman program can't say, you really should go to ABC nursing facility. It is much better than XYZ. They can't share an opinion about a facility, but they can give you an idea of the type of complaints they receive and if the administrator or leadership of that facility works well with the Ombudsman program to resolve those complaints, if there's been a lot of turnover in leadership at that facility, and point you to the direction of the state survey results so you can get an idea of what that facility has been cited on. So even though they can't show preferential treatment to one facility or another, they can give you a lot of information about the facilities in your area, what to look for during your visit, and so on. You need to determine the cost of care and payment options to make sure that you can access that care. Look at federal and state inspection and complaint investigation for that facility. That is available publicly. You can look on Medicare Care Compare and get a really good idea of facilities in your area. If you're looking for inclusive long-term care, there are two key resources I'd like to call out for you. There is a new Long-Term Care Equality Index. It's a tool that facilities use to make sure that they're providing equitable, inclusive care. So you can visit that website and get information about that. And there's also the National LGBTQ+ Elder Housing Initiative. And they work with providers to make sure that their housing is inclusive as well. So you can look at that list. And I believe they have a list of actual providers that they've worked with at that website. And then, of course, last but not least, definitely visit the facility that you're considering. And there are resources on our website and others and what I shared with you today that are indicators of quality care. So look for those during your visits, and also vary the times that you go, even when you're visiting a facility. I'd go during the week, and I'd also go during the weekend and see if there's a big difference in the care being provided. So as far as some key resources I want to leave you with, we, of course, at the National Ombudsman Resource Center, our URL is there. The majority of our resources are focused from the ombudsman perspective, because that is our main job, is to train ombudsmen to do their job. However, you may find some resources that are of interest to you there. But I want to really point consumers and advocates to this website. This is our host organization, the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, also known as Consumer Voice. We've been around for 46, 47 years now, doing grassroots advocacy at the national level for quality care in all settings. Started out just in nursing facility advocacy, but now in residential care communities and a little bit in home and community-based services as well. And then Elder Care Locator, this is where you can find all of your local resources. So you can find APS, your state survey agency, your Medicare, your SHIP program, which is the organization that provides benefits counseling about Medicare and Medicaid. So lots of resources available there. To give you a very quick overview about consumer resources on the Consumer Voice website, we have a ton of fact sheets that are all free. All these materials are free about assessment and care planning, basics of individualized care, how to choose a nursing facility, resident rights, and so on. We have a resident and family council information center on how to start them and maintain them. We have several guides about quality care. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out, and we have an action network. So not myself, because I'm part of a federal grant that operates our, that pays for the resource center, but the policy staff in our host agency with Consumer Voice, they do legislative advocacy, and they provide resources and information for citizens to join the action network as well. So if you're interested in this, advocacy is always needed and welcomed. So please visit the Consumer Voice website for these resources and to join the action network if you're interested. Last but not least, here is all of our contact information. We have social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter. We even have an app for ombudsmen so they can use it out in the field, and then our website as well. And I can drop my individual email address in the chat as well, so you can follow up with me if you have questions. So I know I went through a lot of information very quickly, but like I said, I really wanted you to walk away with at least an idea of rights and who to contact if you are not receiving quality care. And with that, I know we had quite a few questions that came in when folks signed up for the webinar. So I do want to go through those fairly quickly. If you'll give me one moment, I am going to stop sharing or pause, yeah. So I can visit the websites that I looked up before our call today in response to some of these questions. Because as I mentioned, I've been doing ombudsman work or in this field for about almost 20 years, which is insane. So I'm not an expert in all things, and a lot of these questions we received are more about Medicare coverage and how to deal with complaints about coverage. So I'm not an expert in that, but I do know organizations you can contact. So with that, I'm going to go up to, let's see. There was a question about, yes, the ambulance bill, and I don't know who sent this in, but if it's Medicare related, I assume that has been appealed, and you've asked whatever your insurance coverage is, and if it's not Medicare, your other insurance provider, and you can appeal it because you certainly have the right to do so. And durable medical equipment, if you are in a facility and there's an issue with equipment, then that is something an ombudsman can handle. If you are living in your own home and have DME, then unless the ombudsman program in your state provides assistance to individuals receiving care in their home, then it's not likely the ombudsman program will be able to help you on that complaint specifically, but they would be able to refer you to someone that could help you with that. So I'm going to drop in a couple things for complaints about DME, and you may already have this information, but just in case, I'm going to make sure that it's on for everyone. So DME and ambulance related complaints, I would visit this website and see how to go about those complaints and filing an appeal. And I did see one that said Medicare already said they're not going to do anything about it. So then I would also contact your SHIP provider. That is the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, and it is free. And so I would contact them and they will give you some tips on how to appeal it and keep fighting it to get the coverage that you need. Another option would be, because I received a question about, I'm quadriplegic, a lawsuit against Medicare settled in 2013, allowing up to 35 hours for home health aid per week to include help with dressing, bathing, and other activities. I spoke with a Medicare representative who said that is not true, and comments, question mark. So I had to do some digging for this because I wanted to know the answer personally. And I wanted to share, at least based on the Center for Medicare Advocacy, on a couple fact sheets they published. You are correct. The Medicare law states that if the individual is qualified to receive these services, skilled services to maintain function or slow decline can be covered, and eligible individuals can receive up to 28 to 35 hours combined of home health aid and nursing, skilled nursing care. So I am going to drop these issue briefs. Center for Medicare Advocacy. I'm going to drop these issue briefs into the chat. And I'd also suggest, if you haven't already, to reach out or at least look on the website for Center for Medicare Advocacy. They're based in Connecticut. It is a law office. They do not provide direct legal assistance to individuals outside of Connecticut, but they do provide information and assistance. And they're likely connected to attorneys that could help you in your state if you're not in Connecticut. So I would do that if I were you. And another option for folks that need legal assistance, low cost legal assistance. If you're a senior or an individual with disabilities, you could also reach out to Legal Services Corporation. And what I dropped in the chat just now is where you can find legal help. So you can type in your address, your zip code, your city, your state, and you can find someone that could help you as well. And last but not least, because again, a lot of these questions were related to appeals or maybe even legal assistance to make sure you're getting the benefits you need. There is the National Disability Rights Network. We do a lot of work with them as well. Federal law requires that each state have what's called a protection and advocacy agency. They provide legal services and advocacy for folks with disabilities. The National Disability Rights Network, I just dropped into the chat. You can visit that webpage and find your state contact information. So if you need legal assistance and it's something to do with your care that you're not receiving, I would encourage looking into all of what I just posted. So other questions, and the question that made me think of legal assistance was, we live in a condo and we own it. Since my husband's accident, leaving him a quadriplegic in February 2021, I've been trying to get an ADA pool chair installed. I will pay for it, but they're making it impossible for us. And before the accident, we were avid swimmers. So for this question in particular, I would visit that National Disability Rights Network page and see if you can find the protection and advocacy group in your area. And then also reach out to the legal assistance link that I posted there and see if they can help. I'm not that familiar with legal assistance, but with ADA, there of course is a lot of requirements and protections. So I would start there for education about ADA rights. And I will also, I promised Rebecca after this call that I would dig a little deeper and see what else I could find and talk to our policy team at Consumer Voice to see if there were some things that I missed in response to these questions. Question we received, should family members be ombudsmen or does a third party work better? And what if the client has an intellectual disability? So great question. And yes, the Ombudsman program, as you likely understand after the presentation, they are a program that is funded by federal and state funding. And they do often work with volunteers, and they'll train volunteers to be Ombudsman representatives. But that would, because as a resident advocate, there are a lot of rules for not just disclosure of resident information, but avoiding conflicts of interest. And not just actual conflicts, but even perceived conflicts. So a family member couldn't be an ombudsman for another family member. So an example would be if my grandmother lived in a facility that was in my coverage area that I was responsible for as a staff ombudsman, I would have to ask another ombudsman to visit that facility and deal with any concerns of that facility due to conflict of interest. But good question. And yes, I hope my presentation answered the question. If there is an intellectual disability, the Ombudsman program would work with the resident as much as they're able to, and then defer to their legal representative for things that the resident doesn't have capacity for. Let's see. So yes, another question. What rights do I have when negligent care issues create a pressure sore to be ignored? It developed into an abscess. I had to do a stat transfer to a hospital and surgery. I am so sorry to hear all of that. So the question mark was lawyer question mark, report it to the state. How do you find better care facilities for recovering from a surgery? So I would look at all those links that I put in the chat, especially for legal assistance. I would definitely report this to the state survey agency. And if you don't know who your state survey agency is, I will drop in my email. You can email me and I will figure that out for you. But that information is at eldercarelocator.gov as well. You can put in your state and figure that out. I'm not sure what setting you were in when the pressure sore developed, if it was home health or in a long-term care facility, but I'd also reach out to your ombudsman program, especially if it was a long-term care facility, and to help you find one for skilled nursing care. I'm very sorry about that. How do you avoid ending up in a long-term care facility when you're a total care quad and get most of your aids through a government waiver program, but still don't get enough hours? What states have the best hours and program for personal care? I wish I had an answer for this one, and I'm sorry you're in this situation. You are not the only person. It is really frustrating when the waiver programs don't have enough hours to meet care needs. What I did for this question is I actually asked my boss. She's of course, the executive director for Consumer Voice, but she also does a lot of policy work, to see if she had any suggestions for who I can put you in contact with. So if and when I hear from her, as far as kind of an advocacy group that focuses more on HCBS and Medicaid waivers, I will let Rebecca know the answer. The one organization that came to mind was Justice and Aging. I'm not sure what state you're in, but they do a lot of advocacy related to HCBS. So I just put their information in the chat as well. So that may be a starting place. And if, like I said, if my boss has a different idea, I'll follow up with Rebecca. All right, so I am dropping my email address in the chat now, and then I'm going to look at, see if there's any other questions that I missed. Okay, I hear all the time about individuals with SCI being forced into nursing facilities without proper CRT. Why isn't this considered something that's against your rights? Since access to CRT can be different between a healthy outcome and declined health or death. I apologize, Rebecca. I don't know what those acronyms are. Could you drop in the chat, or Rebecca, if you know those, let me know what SCI and CRT are.
SCI is spinal cord injury. And I believe
Yes.
CRT has to do with rehabilitative equipment.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. So Rebecca, I'm not sure this is going to answer your question, but I'm going to do my best. I am sorry if folks are being forced into nursing facilities, especially if they don't have the proper rehab equipment or services. I would argue that that is a violation against your rights because it doesn't meet your care needs. So at the time of assessment and admitting to a facility, it should be very clear what your care needs are and if that facility can meet those care needs. Because technically a nursing facility is not supposed to admit someone that they cannot meet their care needs. Because then once they do admit that person, they're responsible for figuring out how to meet those needs. So if it's, especially if it's something that they already had coming into the facility, then they need to have the equipment they need to have the services that they need that's part of their care. So I'm not sure that's extremely helpful, but yes, I would say that's against your rights. And I do not understand why at the time of being admitted, they weren't clear that they don't have what's available to provide the proper CRT. So I would also encourage you, if you're working with individuals in this situation, to communicate that with your local or state ombudsman program that this is an issue. And I'm glad you brought this up because I'm going to take this back to our team as well. So will the ombudsman get involved if the resident's unable to advocate for themselves, such as dementia or severe stroke? Yes, absolutely. The ombudsman will. The ombudsman will work with that person's legal representative if there's a power of attorney or a guardian, or their nearest family member if there's not a legal representative. And even if a resident cannot communicate at all, does not have a legal representative, then the ombudsman would follow their state policies and procedures and basically get approval from their state ombudsman to advocate on behalf of this resident, access records as needed, and so on. So yes, absolutely. And great question, Marisol, thank you. All right. I hope I answered those questions adequately. And as I said, if I didn't, I will certainly do some more research and circle back to Rebecca with some more answers. And thanks for educating me about the acronyms.
Well, if that's it for questions, then I would just like to thank Amity for such a really wonderful and very informative presentation. I really, really appreciate it. And just thank you to everyone for joining us today. A recording of this webinar will be shared via email with all of you, anyone who registered, and it will also be available on the Reeve Foundation's YouTube channel. And if you don't mind, if you would please be sure to complete our post-event survey, we would greatly appreciate it. We really do take your feedback into consideration. And again, just another big thank you to Amity, and thank you to everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.